There is a lot of anxiety within Kenya over the increased crime rate in the country, and especially in Nairobi. Now, the 1 million Kenya shilling question that is on the minds of many Kenyans is if the allegation that there could be sabotage that has led to this sudden surge in crime, is it really true? That is the million shilling question. Yeah. Is it really true that this surge in crime has been deliberately caused by somebody with their own objectives? Or is it a sign of the times? Times are very hard. Many Kenyans are out of a job. Could that be the reason? Or maybe the other factors? On my show today, I take a very deep, investigative look into these developments. Karibu sana, a very warm welcome to yet another very unique Kumekucha show. A quick reminder, the window of opportunity is closing very fast on my latest super amazing offer to join the exclusive weekly intelligence briefings club. Now you can see details on your screens right now. Please take action. Please don't be left out and regret later. This is very sensitive stuff that will enable anybody to understand Kenyan politics better. Weekly intelligence briefings number 1 to number 91. And this offer, wait for this one, is completely free access to my WABs. 2 months membership. And all you need to do is purchase another very sensitive documentary titled Ruto Dark Secrets. Please don't miss that train. Now if you're enjoying this video already, please remember to give me a like. It helps me a lot. But for now, let's get on with it. Twende kazi. Was it a mere coincidence that President Uhuru Kenyatta hands over to President William Ruto, and then shortly after that, there is a crime wave in Nairobi? Crime surges in Nairobi. Was it a mere coincidence? Or are these things linked? Now, to answer that question conclusively, we have to go back in history so that we understand, so that we get a better understanding of our security apparatus, how they handle crime, and what has happened in the past. I assure you that will be a super eye-opener. That will make everything very clear. Now, I know it will surprise many of us, but this has happened before. In 2002, when Kenyans were celebrating, some of them bathing in the waters of Uhuru Park, you know the park adjacent to the CBD? That one. Kenyans were over the moon. This was after the dictatorial KANU government fell for the first time since independence. And the new government of Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki beckoned. This is after Mwai Kibaki was sworn in at Uhuru Park. And President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi handed him over the sword of authority. It did not matter at all that Mwai Kibaki was on a wheelchair. Yeah, he had a very serious accident. Yeah, towards the end of the campaigns. In fact, he had to be flown out of the country to the UK for further treatment. Now, as the new government was settling in, and Kenyans were full of anticipation, yeah, believing that the second liberation was going to unfold. Of course, that dream was aborted, it was crushed. But by then, very early in the administration, Kenyans were very hopeful. One of the first things that was very noticeable was that the Kibaki administration was grappling with this issue of crime. It seemed that there had been a very sudden upsurge in crime as the National Rainbow Coalition government took over. And by the way, Raila Odinga was part of that government. Yeah, he was the cabinet minister for roads. Very clear signs that Kibaki's government was getting frustrated, yeah, unable to contain this issue of surging crime, came out in some of the president's speeches. At one point, President Kibaki even threatened criminals. Can you imagine that? He said something to the effect that we will catch you and you'll face the full wrath of the law. Imagine that. I mean, seriously. Do you think you can reduce the crime rate by threatening criminals? Of course not. But that was a clear sign that Kibaki's government was getting very frustrated. You see, right at the beginning of this administration, one of the policies of Kibaki was to increase the number of officers, police officers. And I believe in his mind, he was convinced that with more boots on the ground, with more patrols happening, it would be able to contain crime very quickly. It didn't happen. But by the time the year 2005 came along, it was clear that the NAC government had finally been able to contain this monster of crime. And so the mystery here is, how did they do it? That is a very, very deep mystery. And I'll come back to it. It is also very controversial. But a quick aside, there was something very interesting that emerged from this time in our history. You know, we have always entrepreneurs, people looking to make a lot of money from the government, hanging around. And of course, these people are very smart. They knew that the big headache in government was handling crime. And that is how the idea came out of getting a state-of-the-art forensic laboratory, DNA testing, etc., set up in Kenya. And of course, these entrepreneurs brought forward the quotations. And of course, watu wakubwa had their cut in the deal. Now, some of you will already have guessed. These were the beginnings of the biggest scandal that hit the Kibaki administration, the Anglo leasing saga. Now, after 2007, at the beginning of 2008, we ended up with the Grand Coalition government, after the very sad affair of the clashes, the tribal clashes, which gave us a Grand Coalition government, a government of national unity between Mwai Kibaki's PNU and the opposition, which was mainly the ODM party of Raila Odinga. But Kibaki's security apparatus remained in place, and whatever secret ingredient they had used to handle crime and the crime rate remained intact, and therefore there was no problem until 2013, when the this ugly monster of crime again reared its ugly head. Now, of course, what we can clearly see here is a pattern. When a new administration takes over, the same problem recurs. Why? Well, one thing is for sure. This problem definitely has a link to the executive. There is something that only the executive can do, or only the executive can spearhead, before a new administration takes control of the situation. And indeed, I'm persuaded that the Ruto administration will finally be able to get a handle on this. But there's a big if, and that big if is if they can quickly deal with this current controversy at the DCI and over the immediate previous boss at the DCI, George Kinoti. The sooner they can deal with that, then the sooner they'll be able to solve the problem of increased crime, especially in Nairobi. I believe some of you have already realized that my show today should actually be a weekly intelligence briefing, because what I'm about to reveal is highly sensitive. It is the terrible, horrible truth, but it is the truth. You see, as we have said on this channel many times, more often than not, the truth, that thing we all desire called the truth, will most probably end up being the ugly truth. The very ugly truth we don't want to look at, but it is the truth. Now, I don't know how they handle crime in other countries, but I'm afraid, in our dear motherland, the only way that has proved to be effective in handling crime so far is by being able to meet that upsurge in crime with force that is more brutal than that crime or crime wave. That's really what it is. It seems that in Kenya we've reached that place where if criminals are not scared, afraid, then things will not go well. There'll be that upsurge. Which means that the only way that we've been able to handle crime is by creating fear amongst hardened criminals, which of course is not easy. Now you'll excuse me, I have to be careful how I tell you this, so you must read between the lines. You see, hardened criminals will not be afraid of being arrested. That is nothing. After all, the system is so rotten that they have a fair chance of being released at the end of the day. Evidence can vanish. Witnesses can change their statements, etc., etc. I'm sure you get what I'm trying to say. They can only be afraid of something much, much more serious than being arrested, and indeed much more final. I'm sure you get what I mean. And of course, for that to happen, it needs approval and support from the highest authority in the land. That's really what it is. You see, it is very easy for somebody to sit in their comfortable office, secure location. They have round-the-clock security. It is very easy for them to sit down in their comfortable air-conditioned office and say that the criminal justice system must work. People must be arrested, there must be enough evidence gathered, and they must be prosecuted and found guilty in a court of law. That is a process, and the process has a lot of protection, even for guilty criminals, which is as it should be, because you can be sure, quite frequently, innocent people will end up being prosecuted. And so this is a safeguard, so that in case you're innocent and you end up in a place where you should not be, you have a very good chance of proving your innocence. That's how it's supposed to work. But I'm afraid vitu kwa ground ziko tofauti, very different. And because jambazi haelewi lugha ingine isipokuwa risasi, that means that our security forces in the past have only been able to control crime by being brutal. Of course, this does not rule out somebody finding a new way of handling this problem. But so far, I'm afraid, the ugly truth is that is how it has been handled. Now let's fast forward to the present. What is the situation? We're in a situation where those who are supposed to be at the forefront of fighting serious crime are under the radar of Kenyans. Kenyans are complaining about extrajudicial killings. Kenyans are complaining about the police using too much force. What do you think the consequence of that is? It is what we are seeing today. Runaway crime. Because naturally, the people who deal with these hardcore criminals have to take it easy. They have to lie low until the current storm and spotlight on them passes. Doesn't that make sense? You don't stick out your head at a time like this. Because as a police officer, you could very easily end up in the same cells where you're supposed to send criminals. And you could find yourself side by side with some of these hardened guys that you yourself send there. What do you think will happen inside there? You tell me. Bottom line, security is a very sensitive part of any government. And in Kenya, it is especially sensitive. And so when we start playing politics, which involves our security organs, then what is happening now in Kenya should not surprise anybody. I think I've explained in detail. I think you understand exactly what I'm talking about. In my view, you play politics with any other department of government. Play politics anywhere else, but not in the security sector. Please, not in the security sector. Because there are going to be consequences. And indeed we are seeing them now, right before our very eyes. Many Kenyans are afraid. When night falls, they don't know what's going to happen. They can't sleep well at night. And yet they're in their own country. And these are law-abiding citizens. Millions of Kenyans are being affected. Just because some people are trying to score political points. That's really what it is. That is the ugly, ugly truth. And don't misquote me. I'm not supporting extrajudicial killings by police officers. I'm not supporting anything. I'm just telling you the truth, the naked truth, naked ugly truth of how it has been done in Kenya in the past. It is not me who did it. It is not me who came up with this idea. I am just reporting. And so we can comfortably rule out sabotage. For you to sabotage the entire security machinery, that is almost impossible. Anybody who knows how our security organs work will know that that is impossible. And so we can comfortably rule out sabotage. The real reason, is what I've given you. I've gone deep and I've dug out the real reason, which happens to be the terrible truth. Take it or leave it. Until next time, this is Chris. Kumekucha.